Welcome to the Irrepressibles Podcast with today's guest, Ed Hanson.
There's no secret sauce. Anybody who thinks that there is a pattern that you're going to follow and you're going to have financial success and so forth, it doesn't exist. You can be a student until you become a teacher, but you're always a student. Any teacher who thinks they're not a student is wrong. Anybody who's super spectacular at what they do, they work at their craft. They might not always be at the top of their game, but it's the constant evolution to get better and better and better. We mark them as the benchmark of success, but they weren't always there. They were somewhere else as well.
Ed Hanson is a dynamic entrepreneur and business leader with over 30 years of experience in various industries. Just a little heads up, our dogs Murphy and Margot were in the other room at the start of this conversation, and at some point they become a little impatient. So you might hear some barking, and at some point we even let Murphy in on the conversation. You can see him get friendly with Ed and Danny. We hope it's not too much of a problem for you, but at the halfway point of the episode, there's no barking at all, no problem. So we hope you enjoy the conversation with Ed Hanson.
Welcome to the Irrepressibles, the Founder's Mindset Podcast, where we explore what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. I am joined today by Ed Hanson, and I'd like to say welcome. Ed, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Great. And so just to so we understand a little bit who you are, Ed, you've described yourself prior as a serial entrepreneur, having become a coach. So just to be clear, you're not a young startup, a young founder now. You have many years of experience, but you are surrounded in a sense by young founders. But first, before we get into that, who are you? What are the serial businesses that make up the person you are today as an entrepreneur?
First, I think that's a heavy question. I'll say this only because I think when you first start, at least for me, because I'm not a young entrepreneurs now, they can understand that they're a young entrepreneur. Whereas when I started, you were some sort of a weirdo that, what is it? Do you really like what you're doing? Or is it the growing of a company or the growing of a business? So for me, when I first started, like most people of my generation, I started a business in landscaping. And I didn't think that was going to be where I was going to end up.
Okay.
I kind of thought that I started this business. It's going to get me through university. When I'm done university, I'll get a real job. And then, and then all of a sudden, I realized after doing it that was my passion. But I literally thought at that time my passion was landscaping. But was it, or was it growing and learning and developing a business? So through that, as a young entrepreneur at the time, I just had different opportunities come my way. And when they did, I never really shied away from them. Okay. So all the way from, we had a sports field construction company at one point, POA Sports Field Construction. We also had HESPA, Industrial Hygiene Services. So we go in and do testing of buildings and make sure that everything inside the building was fine for insurance purposes. That came through buying out a government agency that was doing it as a lab before. So I had, got some experience with that. But they were other people bringing those opportunities. Yeah. And then you recognize that it's an opportunity and, hey, no one else does this. And then you kind of jump from there. So that's kind of when I realized that I was learning more about the entrepreneur part than I was about having a passion for a specific business. Next one probably that came up was grade A students. Matt LaFrosse was somebody, for me, was a massive influence early on for that, because they showed me a business that had nothing to do with what I was doing, but it was complementary because I needed the service. So I learned from them. But then I learned that by learning from them, they could learn from me. And then all of a sudden we could start to learn from each other. And what a great experience. Yeah. But you can't learn from other people that aren't in the same entrepreneurial brain set. So, on and on from there. But who am I? I don't know. I'll tell you as I keep evolving.
We'll get to know you as we go along when we look at the insights that you have. But I find one thing that you said interesting is regarding the passion, right? It's the passion for something. Initially for you, it was landscaping, but then you quickly found out that maybe the passion was more about being an entrepreneur. And the illustration of that is that you develop many different things that were not necessarily linked to landscaping. And I find that interesting because having talked to previous guests who are young founders, one of the things they said is you have to be passionate about what it is you're selling or what it is you're offering the consumer.
Very true.
So I think, is there a fine line between the passion for the idea versus the passion for the entrepreneur and whatever it takes to be one?
It's a fine line. And I mean that sincerely, because if you don't have a passion for something, like if somebody was, I'll be honest, I've had other ideas come to me before. If you're looking at it from a pure capital growth, like you're looking to make money, that's different. But if you're looking to be the entrepreneur behind the idea, if you're not passionate about it, then I would first tell anybody, don't get in the way. Just get right out, move on. It's not going to work for you. Yeah. Because if you don't wake up with a new idea, it's 2:00 in the morning, I've got something. The classic work-life balance, it doesn't work in the entrepreneur world. It's,
So entrepreneurs get inspired.
Oh, yeah.
Does that distinguish them?
Absolutely. As soon as you get inspired, because you're inspired for the potential. Okay. It's not for today. You're inspired for what you could see tomorrow, what you could see in a year from now, what you could see from 5 years from now. And then once an entrepreneur locks onto that vision, then get out of the way.
Oh, yeah?
Because, a real passionate entrepreneur will not stop. And, some of the things and the key things that make those happen are anything from like to solve problems. There's a problem in front of them that isn't solved yet. So to them, if they think to themselves that I've got to solve this problem, okay, how are we going to do it? I have a vision, and that vision can change over and over again because they don't have committees. They don't have things that can stop them from that. Yeah. And I don't think that I realized it at the time that those were the things happening, but that's what it was. It was it's a craving. You wake up in the morning and you can't stop. You are absolutely engaged in what it is you want to solve.
And do you believe that you become an entrepreneur once you get that inspiration? Is there a before and after?
That is a great question. And I don't actually know it's oddly enough, my son is a goalie. And I wrote an article for a paper one time about, does the position pick the player or does the player pick the position? And I think it's the same thing for sport. Yeah. And I do think actually that it is the other way around. I don't think and I'll use the goalie analogy here. I don't think you can be a goalie just by, I want to be a goalie and kind of have this mindset like I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I don't think it works that way. I think people start businesses and people work at them, but doesn't mean they're entrepreneurs. Doesn't mean that their brain is an entrepreneurial brain. Go back to like a Michael Gerber E-Myth. It's kind of you're taking this brain set that I want to own a company or I want to be part of a company. And then they also, the other struggle is I want to be my own boss. That's not...
You hear that a lot, eh?
Yeah, I think the utopic vision from people who aren't entrepreneurs or aren't business owners, they think that business owners are lucky because they're their own boss. Furthest from the truth. You are your own boss. Yeah. You can solve directions, but like every customer you have is a boss. Every customer that you're looking for can change and shape your vision. You might have a vision and you're trying to grab as many of the people that you possibly can to bring them in, but it doesn't always mean you're not on your own. You can create your own vision, but it doesn't make it the easiest thing in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So you went through ups and downs when you were starting up. What's your take on the mindset that it took back in your day when you were doing it, and what you see now? Because you do see young entrepreneurs and you coach them. It's a different world.
Oh yeah.
A lot has happened in terms of communication, technology, COVID.
Money is another big one.
Yeah.
The way money moves now is much different than it did in my early stages. In my early stages, the only way to grow was on your own. Like you went in, it was all sweat equity. It was all grind. There was nothing else. You weren't borrowing money from anybody because no one was going to give you money. So you had to start, if you think about it, I started, I remember the first commercial contract I ever had as a lawn service back in the early days. And it was for a big, massive lawn. We cut it with a 21-inch lawn boy mower. And to be, to put it into, it would be like taking a bucket of chlorine and pouring it into Lake Ontario to solve the pollution problem. Like, it's not going to work, but we did it anyway. Like, it was the only way we had. So we started an hour earlier. We just, kept going. And it just, that brain of, we're going to get this done. We got it done. It just took us longer to do. But it was also that grit and determination to actually make sure that we could get it done. So you had to do it. You had to scale. To scale, you needed to build a bit of money before you could borrow a bit of money, and then so forth. Whereas now, you can see an entrepreneur with an idea. They like it. They can go and sell it. They can go and sell that idea to people with money to invest in that idea. That did not exist when I first started. So now what you see, I think, is a lot of the people who were from my era who did that style. They're the investors in the entrepreneur ideas now. So
they invest their time and their personal money.
Time and their personal money. Yeah, you see that a lot, especially with, software startups, things like that. You can see that a lot too, where people, they have an idea, it's great, but they have no money to finance it. What is the money to finance it? Paying me while I'm actually doing the, building code, or paying me while I actually do this, or paying someone or a team to do it. Challenge is early days, there's nobody paying you to do that. You had to do it yourself. So that is, I think, one of the biggest changes. And then the vision of, I like, take Jeff Bezos, right? Everybody knows Amazon. And I can't remember what book I read it, but the argument of how many tanks do you need of oxygen to go, how deep you're willing to go, because other people won't breathe where you're willing to go. So if they can't breathe where you're willing to go, half your competition is gone while you go down, get it, and then come back to the top. So how far are you willing to go to not make any money, to not be profitable, to not have other people's commentary? Oh, that's a bad idea. That's not going to work. You're never going to make money at that. Are you willing to keep going while you fight through those? And I see that as a big challenge too, but there has to be a vision associated to it.
So do you think this necessity to be comfortable with risk, basically this is what it is, risking going down where there's hardly any oxygen in order to win? Is this a universal type of quality? Is it something that no matter what generation you're from, this is a must if you want to be a successful entrepreneur?
If you are tentative, if you are risk adverse, and if you are, I guess, unable to passionately execute your vision at all costs, you'll struggle a bit. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that you will have a bit more of a challenge. Now, I will admit, as somebody through Tech Canada, that I coach and facilitate a peer network of entrepreneurs or business owners. Everyone's very different, and how they get and the lens that they look through is incredibly different. But that's where you learn. You learn how someone else does something. You might not agree with it all, but it might then confirm to you, okay, I'm not going to do it that way, but my way, it's still working and I like it. So there is a learning perspective for me where I'm constantly trying to evaluate, well, that works for them. It wouldn't work for me, but can I take something from them? And the answer is you can. But I think that, I don't want to use the word, I'm going to change that a bit. I'm going to say that if you're focused, and you're laser beamed on something, all the other things will just wash away. You have a mistake, you lose money one day, you have a project that's, not actually. A great story for me was early on in my career, someone bought a dump truck. And for easy math, we'll say that dump truck cost $100,000. Now that's not the case, they're about $300,000. But back then it was about $100,000. And this person did not go to university, they did not go to college, but they bought themselves a dump truck. And the discussion from someone was, he charged at the time. I think it was $65 an hour. And the person who he was doing some work for happened to be a lawyer at the time.
Okay.
And the answer he gave in this situation to me was genius. And it was, how can you charge $65 an hour? You have no education. And his answer back was, well, while you paid for education, I just paid for a dump truck that's going to take me to charging a certain amount of money because I have to pay for it. And unlike you, who's waited 4 or 5 years to start billing, I'm billing right now.
Right.
It took me a while, but I love the analogy, right? Like, because he's not wrong.
Yeah.
He was totally right. His investment wasn't in education, so to speak, like formal education. His was in that. And it does make you realize that entrepreneurs, they don't work that way. And actually another step moment in, sort of back then to now, Algonquin College at one point started offering an entrepreneurial course, how to become an entrepreneur. And at first I thought, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. How could you come up with a course for this? I wish this had been around when I was there. But then I also started to realize, how do you become an entrepreneur? Well, you are or you aren't.
Right.
You have an idea or you don't. And sometimes it just takes somebody to get the idea, find the idea. If they can't find the idea, then that's a challenge too. But yeah, it's ever evolving. I can't literally think that you would ever stop trying to figure out an entrepreneur, trying to figure out how they get to be an entrepreneur, learning. And some things resonate with you and other things don't. Yeah. So take what resonates with you is a big lesson I would take from that.
Take what resonates with you.
Let's just take a little break here. I just wanted to thank you for being part of the community and listening in on this episode with Ed Hanson. Make sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to your podcast. And just a heads up, our dog Murphy kind of wanted to be part of the conversation as well, as he was being a little impatient in the other room. So we let him in, and you can see him being super friendly with Ed and with Danny as well. Without further ado, let's get back to the episode, and we hope it doesn't bother you too much.
Welcome, Murphy, to the podcast. And we were just talking about the fact that, Ed, you also have a Bernedoodle like Murphy called Marbles.
Yeah, Marble.
Marble. And we absolutely loved him. And then Murphy just needed to be included. So there we go. But Ed, you mentioned the tech group, and I just want to make sure everyone understands what that is. So tech is for the executive committee.
Yeah.
And can you explain to me a little bit about what that does and how... what your role towards young founders is throughout that group?
Sure. So Tech Canada, I'll look at it from a couple perspectives, but first perspective for me is that I had a business coach, and his name was Mark Sutcliffe, happens to now obviously be our mayor in Ottawa. Yeah. When Mark decided to become a tech chair, I didn't even know what tech was. I'd never heard of it before. And I thought, oh, okay, sure. If this is what you kind of think resonates. And for me, I joined because of the chair. So he recommended it. Because my business coach referred me. He wanted it to be part of my growth. And I thought, okay, this is great. I'll join. And I did not know what I was in for. And the best part was it had no bearing for me. Who's this group? I don't even know them yet. But then when I did join in and get a group, all of a sudden, I can't lie, I didn't even know what I was missing until it happened. So now all of a sudden I have 15 other business owners in the room who are being open and vulnerable about themselves and their businesses and what affects them. No joke, I thought at multiple times I would leave the meetings and say to myself, what just happened? I just heard other people.
Because you'd never seen people being vulnerable in the business world before.
Never, ever. Not only had I not seen them being vulnerable like that, and by vulnerable, I don't mean like the, always the gushy, negative, my life is bad and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. More the fact as an entrepreneur, it's going to sound horrible, but people hide things. Okay. And what you hide is the things you're not good at. My analogy in this would always be that if you go to a hockey tryout and you can't skate backwards at a tryout, you don't skate backwards. Okay. You only focus on the things that you're good at. So you can, and here's the twist though, is that you'll get hired or make a team for what you can do. Yeah. And your gaps, you try to learn and get better at. But maybe while you're getting better at them, you want to highlight the things you're really good at. Yeah. So with all that said, I joined this group, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by a group of people that were open, weren't in my space either. So there was no other companies that did what I did.
Right.
These
So
people
very
all
eclectic
did.
group.
Eclectic, different. You wouldn't think like all of a sudden, why would I, as a landscape construction company, want to be in a group with somebody who was a financial planner or somebody who was a lawyer or somebody who was all of these things.
And it's multi-generational too.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
So, but the thing is in tech, I wouldn't think you take it as generations. You look at it as scale of your business and where you are in your business life cycle.
Yeah. Okay.
So what happens there is there's people who you learn from, you teach, you mentor, you mentee. There's a whole, it's an ever evolving group of people. And for me, I didn't know what I was missing. Found the group, changed my whole business life because I finally could be around a group of people that had similar issues. They couldn't talk about payroll when they got home and the fact that you might not make payroll this week and sales were down and you didn't have enough cash in the bank account to pay suppliers. Like, these are serious entrepreneur problems.
Right.
We talk about all the great things and everything's so great, but it's not always great. It's a lot of times in the background, you're trying to not pay attention to these things while you focus on forward growth. And that's a mindset.
And I can imagine you don't want to share your worries or your preoccupations with your family.
Oh, of course not.
Imagine put that burden on friends and family.
A business owner goes home and says, look, we don't have enough money in the account. Right away, your partner might think, well, then we're not going to be able to pay our mortgage and you shouldn't be an entrepreneur anymore or a business owner. You should go get a real job. You should, and I keep going back to those things. So you just don't, because you're going to figure out how to make it happen.
You have the confidence in yourself to know it's going to work out.
You do.
Yeah.
Not always does that confidence work out, but you do. But you have to have that confidence.
Right.
I would go to a Mike Tyson quote, which is, "You got to be the champ before you are the champ."
That's interesting.
And if your mindset is not there, you're in trouble.
Is that a visualization type of mindset thing? You got to believe that you are. And
well, imagine
feel
it. You're the best podcaster of all time.
Thank you.
Right? But here's the thing: if you don't believe that, how do you prove it? Well, you're going up against Joe Rogan, you're going up against all these other big podcasters.
Right.
Well, if you don't think that you're as good as them, then you'll never be as good as them. You can be a student until you become the teacher, but you're always a student. Any teacher who thinks they're not a student is wrong. They will not make it. Right. But if you don't think you're the best teacher, I think another mindset in that is that I want to be the best teacher. So to be the best teacher means that I need to keep learning and growing so that I can pass that back into the funnel. And, going back to the, closing out the tech item, is that when I sold my company, I had the opportunity to become a tech chair. There was a tech speaker who completely changed, how I looked at things, because it talked about life's purpose. Was my life's purpose to be an entrepreneur? Or was my life's purpose to be a supporter and help other people to gain and do what they wanted to do? So
all these years forward, you're still thinking about your life's purpose.
I still think that's a never-ending quest, because it also, I think you have like a benchmark of something, and then I think that maybe you don't always see it. Like, I thought maybe it was to be an entrepreneur when I was younger, but I think now it is to be a supporter and to help other people get where they want to go. Yeah. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think that, when I see others in my tech group have success, and not my success, their success, what they believe to be success, which isn't always money. It isn't always, maybe they want more time with their family. Maybe they want more opportunities to invest in other businesses. So whatever it is that their success is, if I can somehow get to them and do that, I'm on the sideline while they score the touchdown on the field, and I'm psyched. Like, that's what I want to say. So, another kind of, analogy, which I'm sure a lot of people who work with me would know, I would way rather be the captain that supports everybody and guides everybody to their success than just being like, I'd rather be the worst player on the best team than the best player on the worst team.
So from your vantage point as a member of this tech group, a member with a lot of experience in entrepreneurship, what is your take on what the young founders be they, no matter what their age or from what generation they are. But from your vantage point, what is it that they need the most to hear from a seasoned entrepreneur? What's the advice that you feel like that they could most benefit from? Or is there a pattern in terms of that advice, or is it very individual?
Yeah, actually, I think you got it right there. It's an amazing question, because I like, we talked about this before. There's no secret sauce. Anybody who thinks that there is a pattern that you're going to follow and you're going to have financial success and so forth, it doesn't exist. It's because it's unique and different for every single person. So all that to say, I think that there are probably some things. One is that young entrepreneurs who don't have families yet, they don't have burdens of paying mortgages and all those kind of things, they can pick up and move to another province. They can pick up and move to another country. They can do whatever they want. They're not limited. As soon as you start putting limiting factors on entrepreneurs, there can be some challenges there, and you can have some issues for sure. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that they can't. It just means that things are going to be a little bit
Isn't it
different.
inevitable? Because those factors are life, right? Like a spouse, a divorce, children, grieving,
And things
bad
happen
luck
in
with
life.
your health.
Sure.
Like, there's all that kind of stuff. That
Interest rates go up, loan rates go up. Yeah, absolutely. Bank of Canada says this. Yeah, no, of course, all those things. But if I kind of use the analogy, and I think of this from a firefighter. We've all seen the picture of a firefighter walking out of a burning building. They have an axe on one shoulder, or maybe a person. They're carrying somebody. They're not running. They're walking.
Right.
And the thing is people, I just want things to be easy. They don't go to no firefighter goes to work at the beginning of the day and says to themselves, I hope today's an easy one, because it's not going to be. Their job is to put out fires.
Right.
So as an entrepreneur, I kind of feel you're a bit of a firefighter. But the whole thing of running around and putting out fires all day, I think that gets a bad rap. Because I follow an acronym that I use, and it's GSP. And GSP for me is...
We love that one.
Of course. Well, but GSP, of course, right? If you're a fighter person in your life, we all think that GSP is arguably one of the greatest fighters of all time. I don't care whether it's MMA or it's boxing or whatever you want. I don't care. Pound for pound, one of the best fighters of all time. So if we think of that, then I take the G part is you got to grind. At some point, you have to grind. I don't care if it's a business. Even if you're not a business owner and you want to be better at your job, you have to grind. It's it's inevitable. The next is you got to have a solution to a problem, but you might not know what the solution is until you've been grinding mode. You can't get to that solution. Once you find the problems you need to solve, once you solve them, you create a process. Once you create a process, you move away from that. So there's your GSP. But now once you solve that, you're not done. You're just going to another problem to grind.
Right.
So you just keep doing that along the way. And I think that young entrepreneurs, they're okay with the grind. I think the ones that are really successful don't think that anything is owed to them. They don't think, well, I should be able to, I should have. As soon as they do that, actually I have, I will give a shout out to somebody that I worked with in the past, and he made reference a lot that if you say the word should, you just sounded like you should all over yourself. Yeah, I love that expression. And it's also from someone else too. I can't remember now.
So avoid the word should.
Yeah,
What
should
should we say instead?
I will.
I just said should.
I will. Yeah,
Okay.
I want to make a change.
will,
I'm going
I
to make this
can.
change. I can make this change. This is what we're going to do.
Right.
And then do it.
Okay.
And if you fail, fail is a tough word too. It's a learning opportunity. I used to think early in my business life that when you would have like something that was a massive failure, it's not a failure. It's a learning opportunity because you're going to lose money. You break a piece of equipment. Okay. Now you're going to create a process that doesn't happen again. Right. If you have anything, it could be a failure from a piece of equipment. It could be a person. You learn something through having different employees and staff members where you realize, okay, well, I don't want to treat them that way anymore.
Right.
Or I don't want to let this happen anymore. And I don't, your non-negotiables, right? And that list will come and change and go as you develop.
Right.
Young entrepreneurs, though, rare that they have non-negotiables right off the start. I'm not sure that they see that. And this is my learning. I can't say this for every single one of them, but the ones that do, you start to see success. And it's interesting. We sort of meld the tech part into here. Older people and younger people can't always sit in the room together and always have something that draws them. In tech, though, they do, because they're business owners.
Right.
So right away, they have a commonality. And when they have that commonality, then they can start to put together, okay, this person is inspiring me because of what they're doing. Well, why don't I do that? Maybe you've come to your business cycle where you're starting to do this, but when you're on this swing and you see somebody else on this swing, maybe it inspires you to come back and get that, it's like the old mountain lion trying to re-energize themselves, So no, it's great to have different scales, great to have different scopes in the group, and it's important.
So you said so many things that I just want to follow up on, all very interesting. But I'm going back initially when you were talking about the external factors, the external adversities. Life is what we call it.
Yeah.
Like the examples we gave were divorces, sickness, et cetera, et cetera. So these young entrepreneurs are in a team. They're building a team. They need to be there for the team. When they go through these, I mean, these are challenges that they're going through in their personal life. How do they manage to keep being the leader and being in a horrible mindset in their personal life? Is this something they can share with the team? Is it something they need to hide from the team?
No, I don't think if you're talking about in tech, for an example.
Well, I'm talking about for a young startup company, for example, where you're building a team and you're trying to establish yourself as the leader.
Yeah.
What happens in such a way? Because it will, you're talking about they need to grind and they need to be there and but then whoops, something happens.
Right.
And their mind's not there anymore so much because they're going through something personal that's very intense, maybe. So how do you maintain the business and the team and when the leader's mindset may not be
I think
in the company so much?
I think that lends itself to something that I kind of, and I used to go through this too, that'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
We've all said this, right?
Yes.
Something happens on TV, that's never going to happen to me. And then all of a sudden it happens to you.
Yeah.
But if you've seen it or heard it or felt it from someone else, now you have a resource. My dad used to make reference to the fact that it was another tool in your toolbox. And you might not use it, but all of a sudden you go, oh, actually I do have that in my toolbox. You go back and you reach in. So if you've heard another entrepreneur tell you what it was like when they went through a divorce or when they went through a parent passing or something, or a time commitment that they have, I could give you lots of analogies, but one, for me, when I think of all the things, like I have gone through a parent passing, actually two parents passing while I was in business. And one was a real struggle. When my dad passed away from cancer, it was tough because my mentor through business in the early stages, and what that meant to me was he was always supportive, always had my vision, never was like backing, going, oh, you're crazy, you don't think like that. And he's gone.
Yeah.
So how do I?
It was a pillar that disappeared.
How do I carry on?
Yeah.
Took me a long time, probably about 20 years after that, to realize that they're always with you. You just have to build that into who you are now, and you have to carry that forward. So, but at the time, I had no one who'd been through that, or no one that shared with me that they'd been through that. So that was one. I think also, divorce is another major one. And divorce can be multiple things. It doesn't always have to be from a spouse. It can be from a really close friend, or it can be from somebody that's been a lifelong passion of yours that all of a sudden, moved on in a relationship from you. It could be a sibling. It could be all sorts of things, but not to get, too deep on that. But those are life-changing things. And if you've heard how someone else managed through it and took away the mindset of that will never happen to me, learn from it.
Right.
And I think that that's something that it's hard.
So does that, is that in keeping with what we call the adaptive mindset?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. If you can't, if you're, think of it, because let's say come from the horticulture world, I would say that if you can't be an apple tree, bend but not break, you probably won't bear fruit.
Okay. Love the analogy.
And I think that, if you wanted to, I keep, and there was a time period in my life where I kept saying that to myself, bend but not break, bend but not break. And that means that sometimes you're going, I mean, we could get back to the non-negotiables and we could, argue that, because sometimes I believe that you do have to stray away from certain things just to kind of bring yourself back to center. Sometimes you have to experience something to come back to center so that you appreciate where you are. It might shift your center, but it can change that. But I think that being adaptable, you go to work, what's your plan today? You have to have a plan. You have to have some executables. You have to have some goals, something you want to make happen. But then what happens if this happens? Well, you weren't expecting it.
Right. And that's always going to happen.
Right. So you have to adapt. And if you can't learn to adapt, you're in a lot of trouble.
I once heard that one thing that draws the type of people that are entrepreneurs to entrepreneurship is the problems. These are people that love solving problems. And once they've solved one, they're looking for the next one already.
That's actually, that I have seen, and I've seen that not only from tech, but I've seen that from my friends. I've seen that from other business owners. When an entrepreneur gets bored, watch out. Yeah. It's not good. Okay. Because they're bored.
Does that happen?
All the time.
Get bored? It seems
Absolutely.
to me there's...
But what they deem as bored is, I'm thinking I want to retire, or I want to move on, or I want to, I need something different. Or all of a sudden they stop working on their business the way it traditionally has been worked on. Yeah. And now they'll start thinking about a new service to add. They'll start thinking about how they can take some money and capital they have in the business and how they can maybe take it outside of the business and maybe we can invest in something else.
So that's when the new ideas come in.
Yeah, but watch out, because that's when you get into, traction EOS, where their brain goes into this focus of, I don't want to worry about the executables of the company. It's not but it doesn't make them not caring. Yeah. It makes them that their brain now wants to go to the next problem. The jigsaw puzzle's been solved. Yeah. That's great. It looks good. Yeah, I really enjoyed the 1,000 hours it took to build this, but now I need another project. And if they can't find that other project, they don't think it's boredom, but you can see it. Their mind, my wife jokes that I only have 2 speeds, on and off. When it's off, it's not good because I'm not productive. You're
not inspired.
No.
Stimulated.
Right. But that's also, so you wake up and you got to charge to your problem. You got to charge to your issues. I have 2 children, 2 adult children, and I learn from them all the time, both of them. They're very different. But I can take business lessons from both, even though neither of them are entrepreneurs. It's not their brain set, and
Tell
that's
me about
fine.
That. What are you learning from? So you're learning business advice from
absolutely, because you hear it also. So
family members.
One thing that I learned from my daughter, and I'll jump this one out. My daughter is a very caring, empathetic person, and one of the things that she constantly teaches me is the viewpoint of a staff member, committed to their company, committed to driving forward, but has to also get something from the business that she works in to feel like she's energized and has a pride in what she does. And if she doesn't have that, she won't thrive in the environment. But when I see things, like an example, she might win, she recently at the end of their year, she won an award at their company. And the pride that she takes in that was exceptional. And to me, those kinds of awards don't mean much to me because I look at them and I think, oh, okay, it's another certificate, it's another thing, but it's not the same way. So I look at it and then realize, okay, these things do matter. And they do matter to teams and staff more so than I would think. So my user experience isn't the same as her user experience. Exactly. But I learned from it. And one thing that both her and I think the thing that really draws her and I together so well is that we're both open to listening to each other's different sides of things. Right. Because she might come to me and say, okay, I'm going to talk to this type of person today. How would you respond? Right. Okay, here comes, I might change this because what you're saying comes at me from this angle, but it might soften if it's coming from this angle. Okay, didn't think of it that way. So she's taught me a lot about that part. My son's a little bit different. As a software engineer, he kind of comes at things from a very logical, tactical approach. Yeah. And I love hearing how he goes at problems. And he's taught me, for an example, at one point, he's working on a program and he's lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling.
Okay.
So to me as an entrepreneur, I walk in the room, what the F are you doing? And I think, what are you doing? I'm thinking. Thinking about what? A problem. To me, that's not working, right? Like my brain, that's not working.
Right.
But to him, and by the way, in his case, super high performing. He played NCAA hockey. He's an academic All-American. Like this, this is not a person who you wouldn't think is not working, but it starts making me think that is work.
Right.
So one thing that some companies do that I'm starting to see that I really would never have been part of my brain set before is deep work cycles, allowing your staff to not get caught up in disruption of workflow. So we all know that if you're vacuuming your house and you want to walk around, you're vacuuming and then the phone rings. Okay, well, I answer the phone and I take the call, but where did I finish vacuuming? So my workflow has stopped.
Right.
And then it's no different. Customer comes in, you're working the cash and something happens. Okay, well, now where do I go back to it? So I know for my son, where he works, they have an open time where no disruptions, no meetings, no inputs, nothing. You're deep work.
Wow.
So
well, that
good
takes
learning.
some creativity on the part of his business owner.
Sure.
He's an employee. He works for a business owner, but it
In his
gets
case, he works for a massive company.
a massive company. Okay, but still, it requires a working environment that allows that sort of thing. Which gets me to, we were talking about adaptability, but I'd like to talk about creativity a little bit, because we don't typically think, we being someone who's not in business, someone like myself, we don't typically think of business owners as being particularly creative. We
Artists.
think of them as being mercurial, sort of organized, structured.
No, the opposite.
But there needs to be some creativity. And one of the examples that struck me the most was COVID, and how some of the businesses, and I was talking to someone recently who's the owner of an online local meat company, who initially was working in a certain way pre-COVID, and COVID arrived, and he had to rethink his whole business model. So what's your take on that, on the importance of creativity to make it in business?
I don't even know where to begin on that, and it's
That's a
funny
big
because
question.
it's a universal, massive question.
Yeah.
But if you want to solve a problem, you give it to a bunch of entrepreneurs, and they'll find the way to solve it. They might not have the tactical solution of the nuts and bolts of it, but they might have the vision of it.
Right.
And I think that COVID was a great example, because if you look at COVID as being probably the biggest change in most young entrepreneurs in particular, they've never gone through a hard time. Somebody like myself, I had never been through a COVID before, but I had been through massive turns in the economy that were not relatable to COVID even. They were big crashes, and how do you survive through that? If you think of yourself like a rat, or you think of yourself like and I say a rat in the sense that you've got to survive. So how do you survive? You survive by finding ways to make it happen. So that's what entrepreneurs do.
Right.
But creativity comes in all sorts of different ways. If you go back to school, the things that create a creative mind, art class. You look at art as a funny thing. Some it speaks to some when you see a picture on the wall.
Yeah.
But to some, it's not the picture on the wall that they see. They look at it and think, wow, I wouldn't do it like this. I would do this. Or if somebody starts analyzing it from their perspective, they're seeing something way different than the artist intended. But that's creative. That's when somebody starts to give them some paint and let them paint. I think that's an entrepreneur. It's just their canvas is the business, not the actual piece of art. So when we start to look at things like that, creativity, the out of the box solution. If you give a classic group of entrepreneurs and have them build a bridge with some straws and some tongue depressors and something, none of them will build the same bridge.
That's true.
They might not all work, but it's part of it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how it works. That's another thing in creativity, is if you're creative, you're okay to fail in the traditional sense, because it's not failure. It's learning one way that doesn't work. So it's just a way different mindset. But I think that creativity comes. We used to think when people were younger, and I say younger in the school age, art, music.
Mm-hmm.
Think of engineers. Even an engineer solves a problem in a way different way because they have to figure out actually, the first time I ever saw this was in software where you would see, I saw somebody who was a code writer and told me that something was a very elegant solution.
The word elegant didn't seem to go with
Yeah, that's an elegant solution, like 2 + 2 = 4. However, but when they started to describe it, it was quick, it was efficient. They used the best management of code to get to the quickest line solution. It's an artist working on a pattern, right? Somebody who's into code will look at software code and think to themselves, wow, this is really well done. Instead of 400 lines of code, but someone had to write the 400 lines of code to somebody else working it back to 20 lines of code. So who was willing to be the first person? Probably the most creative person.
Probably the most creative. It's super interesting. You were mentioning in the last few words that you were saying moments of adversity, I guess, which is where some of the creative instinct comes from. You have a problem, you need to find a solution, you become creative. Which leads me to a question. In your view, to become a successful entrepreneur, do you need war scars? I mean, do you need to have gotten hurt, had to get back on the horse in order to become an efficient, successful business?
So I'm going to say this a couple times. Imagine, take a sports analogy, which I use a lot. If you think that someone comes into any professional sport and they win a championship in year one, people who've been in the sport for 10 or 20 years will look and say, hold on a second, who's this person? They won a championship right away. The reality is their battle scars are going to come later. So every young entrepreneur comes up with a great idea. They might have some battle scars, but maybe not at the same scale or scopability in their business life cycle. But I do think there is no long-term successful entrepreneur who doesn't have battle scars. And it could be anything from surviving a bankruptcy. I had a business professor once in university that said that every business is 3 months away from bankruptcy. Doesn't matter how successful you are, doesn't matter where you are. And he's right. He was so right, because through my life cycle in businesses, I had many of those times when it just wasn't going to happen. And the problem, or a challenge is that because I said in the beginning, there's no secret sauce, there's no perfect solution. And I also think that imagining that there is, or imagining that you have solved every problem, it's not true. Every unique situation comes up. So how do you come up with them? We mentioned it. Part of it's creativity. I think part of it's being adaptable. I think part of it's learning that you're good with the grind. I think that there's all these things. But battle scars, I think if most entrepreneurs stripped down to their bathing suit, there would be a lot of battle scars. And I think that some of them might not be a battle scar to someone, but to them, it was a big battle scar. Something even as simple, we talked about like kids playing sports. Imagine you're an owner, you're a business owner, you're trying to drive your business forward, but your kid is a hockey practice. It sounds like nothing, but it is. I want to still be part of my family, and I want to still get my kid to practice, try out, whatever, and support them. But this client needs this. Okay, well, how do you work that around? If you've had somebody who's gone through it, they can give you suggestions of what they do, which then might trigger you to do what you do. My son played hockey with somebody who's, their son came to practice quite often in a taxi cab. And I thought at first this was crazy. I was like, who does that? But then as I got a little bit along in my journey, I realized, wow, that was genius. Because they found a way to make it happen.
They got creative.
So what's wrong with that? It's just because it's not what everybody else would do. I think most entrepreneurs have to get past, I'm not going to do things what everybody else thinks I should do. Get out of the box and think a totally different way.
Getting back to the scar itself. So we talk about the battle scars. For it to become a scar, it means that you actually got hurt. And you healed in a certain way, if you want to use that analogy. is it, and you were saying also most entrepreneurs have to, live with the idea that they're going to face bankruptcy every 3 months, something to that effect. This constant fear of failure, I suppose. So where I'm getting at with this is when you do hit the bottom and injure yourself, have a scar, heal, where does the drive to heal and continue come from? Because that's what and I've said this in prior podcasts, that's what amazes me, is how you have another type of person that might not be an entrepreneur and faces those kinds of daily adversities and the risks and the stress, may decide, this is not for me. I'm going to go find a secure job, with a pension plan and this and that, and some sort of form of security. But where do you dig deep to get the inspiration to keep going, knowing that it's going to continue in this way?
First of all, I love that question, and I love that you brought it to the forefront, because I do think that is one of the most important parts of being an entrepreneur. When you describe a stable job with a pension and all that, to me, that's a prison.
Okay.
And I say that because if you're telling me there's a limit, like I can only earn X and I can only do Y and I can only do A, and that's it. Yeah, you put me in a box. I hate that. I wouldn't be able to function. Okay. And that's not just me.
Yeah.
That's most entrepreneurs. Their brain, now you've just contained them. They look at that person. Now, that person looks at an entrepreneur and says, I'm not willing to risk my family. I'm not willing to risk my mortgage. Like, if you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, their mortgages have second mortgages on their house. They have, they have no savings because they put it all into what they're doing. I don't think that's wrong. I think that's mitigating risk and figuring out what's got value for them to actually risk. But how do you solve the pain? So I think there's a couple of different ways. One, as somebody who played competitive sports my whole life, I draw on that experience all the time. For those that, if anybody's listening to this that ever played sports with me probably knows, I am one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet. However, I've learned to contain that, because when I'm competing is different than when I'm having a conversation with you. Not everybody wants to hear that competitive brain going in you. For those who've listened to like David Goggins or somebody like that, I can't lie. Somebody like David Goggins resonates pretty heavy with me. And the reason is because we lie to ourselves about certain things. I think that every entrepreneur lies to themselves I think that every business owner lies to themselves.
About what? What do you mean by lies to themselves? Are you talking about limiting beliefs or?
Yeah, maybe. But they say that everything's okay. How's everything going? Oh, it's great. Yeah, things are good.
And they're lying to themselves, not just to
Are they? But that's okay, because sometimes you do have to lie to yourself to get yourself over that hurdle. I know that might cause some issues moving forward. People hear this, they might think, oh no, you got to be honest. You do have to be honest with yourself. But the thing is, you have to be realistic with yourself. And I think that with pain, my dad used to say, and I've used this a lot recently, and I keep, pushing this, every smooth finish requires sandpaper.
Okay. To smooth it out more? Feel the pain?
You have a rough, you cut something, it's rough. How do you make it smooth? You take sandpaper and rub it against it.
Yeah.
Well, what that to me looks like is that's the same analogy for absolutely everything we do. Everything you do in life, nothing is easy. So you're going to have to take, maybe it's different grit level of sandpaper. Like some it's, a little harder and, tougher. But think about it, right? You want to go to the gym and get in better shape. You want to lose weight. You want to get a better job at work. If you work like a $15 an hour employee, you will only ever be a $15 an hour employee. If you want to be, my dad used to say, I remember one of the first jobs I ever had, I was making $4.25 an hour at an A&P grocery store. And I had the opportunity to work in car order. Doesn't happen anymore, I know. But back then, car order, what that meant is people would get their groceries from the cash. It would go in a box on out to an area where the car could come around and then pick up their groceries, and we'd load it in.
I remember that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, similar vintage.
Exactly.
But what this car order taught me when I was young was when I would deliver I would make sure that if I was putting their eggs in the car, that they weren't stacked on top of, or underneath a can of Coke or a bottle or something like that. So just to make sure that they wouldn't get banged around. But what that meant was that the next time that person, hey, thanks so much for this. And then all of a sudden, instead of making the $4.25 an hour, I was making minimum $1 per car that was going through, because I was giving them such great service that they were tipping me.
Right.
So I wasn't making $4.25 an hour. I was making more.
Okay.
But when I'd make 10, 12, extra dollars an hour, it wasn't the money that ever drew me. And I know that's a bit different for most entrepreneurs. It's never been about money.
Okay. So that's interesting, because it brings me to money, because when we go into business, presumably it's to make money. It's to make a profit.
Yep.
At the end of the day.
At the end of the day, yeah.
But I remember speaking to you earlier, and you were saying, is the end goal money? Is it for you? Does that have to be the end goal to be a successful entrepreneur, or does it have to be the passion for what you're doing?
The success is different for everybody.
Right.
And I say that, like, you're right. Some people, it is purely money. Some people, it is about... And I also want to say clearly, so that everybody's on the same page. If you're in business to lose money, that's not correct. Like, you should have business acumen enough to realize. But short term, sometimes you have to do certain things to get to a long-term goal. I look at the analogy that I would rather win a Super Bowl than make money, because I think the two come in different angles. If I only worry about making money, I might not win a Super Bowl. But if I worry about winning the Super Bowl at what cost, then I might do the same. So what does it take to do that? I need to practice. I need to get better at my trade. I need to become an absolute subject matter expert so much that you can't not afford me. So, that to me is they kind of go the other way around. So for me, which is maybe different than most entrepreneurs, I never had that mindset that I needed to be rich and I needed to be have the most money of anything. But I did need to be the best at what we did. Right. And I think that for me, led to probably doing some things that maybe in a textbook might not look good. And how I looked at my early stages of business, I thought about investing in equipment, for an example. So I would buy as much equipment as I possibly could, because I thought that would long-term, I'd sell it and that would be my retirement and all that sort of thing. But then you realize that, okay, all right, that wasn't the case. Also, too, back then we had no mentors. There were no coaches back then. That just, wasn't the case. So you learn from different people. You grow from different things and build different battle scars that you have. And you go, okay, I'm not going to do that again. So kind of bringing that question back about how do they heal, it's by learning from them. To me, a mistake is not a mistake if you've learned from it. If you learn from it, great. Now I move forward, and the ability to move forward. If I don't have that ability to move forward.
And then you build a stash of mistakes, I'm assuming, that makes you grow and grow as an entrepreneur. But getting back also to the, is it about money or something else? Prior guests at this podcast have said, and these are young entrepreneurs, young founders, and they're saying what you need, to keep yourself going during the hard times is the passion and the absolute conviction that your idea is going to see itself to fruition. And they specifically said, if you're doing it for the money, you will fail, because
100%.
So if, I don't know if it's a younger generation thing or not, but they seem to see it like that.
I think that again, because you're seeing specific young entrepreneurs that are successful at doing what they do.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
It's when you want to see the ones that aren't. And I think that there was a study or a survey recently that I read that the young small business entrepreneurship in Canada is dramatically decreasing. So owners they're becoming less and less, because they're more risk adverse. They're more issues. People are, instead of 4 small stores, they become 1. Instead of 4, 5 different companies, they become 1.
And why do you think they're becoming less risk adverse, or more risk adverse, I should say? Because we spent some time earlier talking about the comfort with risk, and that's a fundamental quality of wanting to be an entrepreneur. And now we're saying the new generation seems to be more risk adverse.
So what I might say here might be a bit controversial. And the reason I say that is because I think that as parents, we focus on, I don't want you to fail because I failed, and I want you to do, something that, like, I want your life to be easier and more comfortable and things like that. I don't know if that builds resilience. And I think that, and certainly I made my mistakes as a parent too. I'm not ever claiming otherwise. But young people, and I don't know if I can say young people. I feel it's just, I'm not big on the age of someone, because I can meet somebody who's in their 20s or 30s and they're just as tactical as a person in their 50s and 60s. And you but I think it's more the era that we're in. And I think the era that we're in is I deserve more than what I've worked for.
Right. And that's a mindset in itself.
Can
you go into business with that kind of mindset?
No, I don't think so. Okay. You deserve nothing.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, one wakes up in the morning, they don't deserve anything.
Right.
They deserve to get back at it. They deserve the opportunity to work hard at something. And by the way, I think that to be good at something, it doesn't matter about entrepreneurship. It can be anything. You have to work at your craft. It doesn't matter what it is. And if you don't work, and I use people like, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, anybody who's super spectacular at what they do, they work at their craft.
Yeah.
They might not always be at the top of their game, but it's the constant evolution to get better and better and better. And then what we do is we mark them as the benchmark of success. But that's not it. They weren't always there. They were somewhere else as well. I don't think Kobe Bryant woke up in the morning and said to himself, well, today, I'm going to take it easy. I don't think that was the mindset. But he's not, you think of them as an entrepreneur or not. I think they have the same entrepreneurial mindset of wake up, got to get going, got to get, I don't deserve to win this game. Did you? Recently to use another sports analogy, which will date when this podcast was filmed, but the Chiefs played the Bills in the championship game just recently, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, but Josh Allen in the press conference after, the quarterback on the losing team, made a comment that I loved, and he said, how upset are you? Did you deserve to win the game? Et cetera, et cetera. And he took a deep breath, and then he said, to be the champions, we have to go through the champions, and we didn't. To me, it just answered
to be
the whole...
champions, we have to go through the champions.
That's right. So the other team had won the Super Bowl previously, so he had to win, they had to go through that team, whatever it took to win, and they just didn't do it.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean you're wrong or you're bad. They had a great season. They were probably one of the best teams. Again, could get in trouble for this, but it'd probably be the Bills and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl because they're the two best teams. But the reality is that's not going to be the case. So if you want to be a champion at something, you got to go through them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just actually battling yourself. If I was to get into anything else, all the other people, it's all self-limiting. You can beat anybody. You can be the best business in what you do, but you have to decide that. You have to decide that you're going to be better than X company. Doesn't matter what service you provide, you can be better than someone else. If they don't like it, you can come after them, but you're not going after them. You're trying to make yourself better.
Yeah, and like you say, it has to really come from you. And sometimes, especially with the ones that are starting off, they have feedback, from friends, from family, people telling them you're crazy. Why are you doing this? You left a secure job. You're doing this. I hear that a lot, and yet they persist. They keep going, and they have so much conviction. And they believe so hard that what they're doing is what they're meant to be doing, or that it's going to succeed.
Yeah.
That they see it through, and they have to fight. All these external, very powerful influences, because they're coming from friends and family, people that you love and that you respect.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy to go against that grain, but it's something that needs to be done in certain cases.
this is a tough one too, and it's probably gonna have a lot of people kind of polarize people a little bit, which I've learned from myself that that's okay, because you want to create your tribe, and your tribe needs to have the people around you that believe in you. However, I also think the difference of somebody like, and this is from someone else, but if a friend, what we consider a friend, is very different than what a real friend is, in my opinion. So a friend is somebody who's honest with you. It doesn't mean that they agree with you. It means that they're honest with you.
Right.
Oh, I want to quit this job because it's, not the owner this, this person does this person does that. A friend doesn't say, great idea. A friend says, have you thought about it? Are you working as hard as you possibly can at work? Like, they need to ask you the tough questions that when you're looking in the mirror are the only way to get answered. So if a friend, and this can only be seen retrospectively, like, going back and looking at. I think that if I look at the people in my life who I just stopped listening to the people that were against what I said or what I was hoping to do. And it wasn't against them. I just stopped listening to them.
Kind of tune them out.
Oh yeah. That classic, oh, great. That's so good. I'm so glad. Oh, that's such a great idea. As soon as you walk out the door, you're thinking to yourself, oh, it's already gone. And that doesn't mean I'm not listening to you. It means that I've heard your opinion. I appreciate where you're coming from, but it's not my opinion.
But your conviction is so strong that you're able to get past that.
Yeah. And that's something that I think, if we talk about the age of business, I think that, old school, politically, you could be from one party, I could be from another party, but we could still play together. We could still organize. We don't do that anymore. We polarize ourselves.
That's
this is what I believe, and this is what I believe.
More and more.
Oh yeah, and I think we are. I've been using this expression recently that we're stronger together, and I believe that that's true.
Yeah.
But I also believe that it doesn't mean I have to believe what you do or say. You might work at a job that I think is one might work at a job that I think is absolutely ridiculous. But it doesn't mean that because it's not what I would do, doesn't mean that I don't support you. Actually, recently in a tech meeting, someone actually said, after a big discussion, one of the members made reference to the fact that, hey, you've heard a lot of opinions today, but you know what? Keep being you. And at some point,
that was
realized
his advice.
that was his advice.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this is it seems like it's nothing. But you know what it means? Someone sent me a note the other day, and I never thought that I was like a 15th place ribbon guy or something like that. I'm not. I kind of came with that. If you're second place, it's nice and you've learned a lot, but you really are the first loser. Like you didn't actually win, but so if you look at it that way, if it's about winning and losing, it's about growing. And if you grow enough that you can come back to win another day, to me, that makes a massive difference. So who's on your team? Yeah. Pick your team. Pick who's on your team. Yeah. Pick who you're learning from. Pick who's helping you grow. But some days you grow, some days you don't. But the last thing is just if you don't grow one day, then what it takes the next day to get back up and try to grow again, that's what you want to surround yourself with.
So picking your team, which is another really interesting topic, because as you know, you've met some founders that have surrounded themselves, and I'm talking about their business team, with friends and family. Not everyone chooses to do this, but some of them do. In the long term, is this a good strategy? Is this dangerous? Is this something?
Love this question.
Yeah, because the team is presumably there because they're inspired and they believe in the project. But we're talking about relationships that go beyond business relationships.
Yeah,
is that sustainable in the long term, in your opinion? So
I have to say that sometimes you look at like hardcore data and you'd be really challenged to argue it. So I do think that it is from picking your team. I think that once a family member decides to join your team, I think the reality is now they're on the team. They're not family anymore. They're on the team. And that team is now a family.
So you have to make a sort of break or sort of
well, there's
separate your personal relationship with your business relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My wife and I work together, and we worked together before. I come from an industry and a profession that I would bet you the largest portion of businesses and long-term businesses are multi-generational.
Yeah.
They've passed from family to family member to family member. Mother and father worked at the business.
Yeah.
Then their son took it over. Their daughter took it over. And now all of a sudden it's, their kids, but maybe your kids don't want to be that. Husband and wife, husband and son, mother and daughter, like they all work together. But there is also it goes to show this to me, there is no better force than the bond of a family. But what your family is a bit different. It's not always the bloodline. It can also be your team that you've collected together. Yeah. But I don't think there's anything. I know I can never work with my partner. I've heard this many times. But then I also think to myself, well, you do at home. Like, so what, why wouldn't you, if you think about it, like one of you makes dinner when the other one can't get there. Yeah. I'm blessed with this. I had two grandmothers that were polar opposites in the way that their mindset was. One of my grandmothers was very much political. She was one of the first women to do a bunch of things in Canada. She was, did a whole bunch of stuff, very much out in front, and told me once when I was in university, that the worst time in Canadian history, the reason for the fail of the modern family was when women went back to work.
Oh.
Wow. What a comment. Yeah. This from the most feminist person I've ever seen in my life. But she turned it around to tell me it wasn't the women going back to work. It was the break in the family unit. So a husband could stay at home and it would be perfectly fine. That's in my grandmother's mindset.
Someone had to stay at home.
Someone had to be responsible for the home chores. Everything we've done in society has changed to, we don't need those things. We can shop online. We can do this. We don't need those things anymore. But it was polarizing ourselves into a female having to do that. Those are ridiculous comments, of course, right? We know that now. And my other grandmother was the biggest support to the family unit that you could ever imagine. She came to live with me when I was in not me, but my family, when I was in like grade 7 or 8. Every day she made sure that like there was homemade food when you got home. She made snacks for you. She even ironed jeans. So to me, like these were things though that doesn't make her less of a person. What it made to me was this was the biggest cheerleader supporter. Whatever you chose to do, she had your back.
She had your back. Yeah.
So, oh my God, what a great supporter. Yeah. Right. So but it took years to learn those things. You kind of devalue things or value them or, I don't know. I both my parents worked. So I was always from the mindset that that's what built the, there's time you got to go out and hustle. But neither of my parents were entrepreneurs in any way, shape, or form. Yeah.
And what about when you've built a team, friends and family, but then you have to make decisions that are going to have an impact, potentially life-changing impact on your team.
Yeah.
Prestige recently did a podcast. We had Louis and Travis here, who basically asked their members of their team to pick up and move to Halifax. A big decision, a huge decision. And I know it wasn't easy for them to make that ask. They did it anyway, and it worked out. It really worked out. But that's just an example I want to give of the sort of thing sometimes in business that you need to ask of your team, given the vision that you've given for yourself and for your company. That can't always be easy either to...
Leaders have to make short-term decisions that affect the long-term outcome of things. Yeah. And in doing that, they really sometimes have to make uncomfortable decisions that can also affect your entire team.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I think that there is a bit of a struggle sometimes because we don't want to make uncomfortable decisions. And I say we, that's the collective group, right?
Collective, yeah.
So when you're a young entrepreneur and you want to make those decisions, if you have a top performing person and they don't want to go to another province, they don't want to go to another city, what do? Well, if everybody does paddle in the same direction, it's great, but it's not always going to be the case, right? There is a movement that I have seen for sure with entrepreneurs that to be a successful company, I think you do have to make your team excited and you have to make your team willing to do certain things. Now, the other side of that is that your team, you can't work them like a dog and treat them like that. It's unacceptable, and it will never have you be a success if your success is at the detriment of others.
Good point.
So if that's the case, old school, that used to happen. People would what they would do is they would build their companies on the backs of others.
And it worked back then.
Oh, it did.
And why doesn't it work today?
Because it's really unacceptable. Like, to be honest, I mean, one of the things about making, we talked about making money earlier, and it was, for me, it wasn't about that. So all of a sudden, if you think about it, I would rather my entire team make, good money, everybody in the company make good money, because your success is their success. Yeah. The only problem as in entrepreneur and business owners, everybody's success is great, but when there's failure, it's your responsibility.
That's right.
And that's something that is really tough, because I used to keep it at my original company. I used to keep a paycheck on my filing cabinet that I could see from my desk. And it was a $1 paycheck. And the reason I had that there was it just kept me in that mindset that, that's what I'm worth. If I don't, I see. Like I needed to look and say,
this is the alternate reality if I don't respect the values that I've set up for myself.
And you're also too, I think it's a Simon Sinek book, leaders eat last, or leaders, come to the table last, something like that. And I agree. I mean, at the end, if you're, the head of a family and you're making dinner and there's only food for your children, I'm assuming you're letting them eat first before you are. But others might think that you might need to eat first so that they can, because you now have a provider. So
it's like taking the oxygen first before giving it to your kid in an airplane.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
those survive in order.
There's a survival part too, and I do think that as a leader, actually, the first time I ever had to learn that was during COVID. We had to, in the industry that I was in, we were deemed, and I hate this, I hate the terms that they use, that you were, a company that, was allowed to keep working because you were essential. I can't lie, that kind of bothered me, because that means that your work wasn't essential or wasn't valued. That could be challenging if you were in that category.
Yeah, it must be hard coming back after being told
well, we're not essential, but we're coming back to work. But I mean, that's a mindset thing too. But we were deemed essential because of some of the services that we provided. But there was a time period where the struggle for me was I had never laid off team ever.
Oh, God.
And the hardest stretch for me emotionally was that I had to let go of 40 plus staff all in one signature, so to speak. It and honestly crushed me. I bring them back afterwards, don't get me wrong, but I felt that I had to look after them. And then my problem became that, and this is where, say tech came into great hands, because a lot of the owners and other business owners at the time, if you bleed yourself so low that you can't survive, then the company can't survive. Right. If the company can't survive, then there is nothing for them to go back to. So I did take that mindset. But what was interesting, you check in on them, but in honesty, not every teammate checked in on you.
Okay.
And that,
so it could get lonely up there sometimes.
Lonely doesn't even begin to describe entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is very lonely. No one is there but the thing is, looking in the mirror, that's who you've got. That's your team. In the end, you're born, you're on your own, you pass away, you're on your own. I don't mean this to sound horrible. Nope. There's people who are in your life and it's important, but you can't always look to others to solve things.
Right.
And that can be tough. Yeah. That can be the real hard point. But other people can help you. They can be there for you.
Which brings us back to tech. That's the purpose, from what I understand, is that what you did not have when you were in your early years of entrepreneurship is now a possibility for some young founders. And this sort of solitude or loneliness, and desire at moments to be vulnerable, where it's not always possible to be vulnerable because you're protecting your family, etc. It's possible to do so within this group. So I'm just wondering, could you give us a little insight into like what would have been one of the significant conversations, or one of the most uplifting, or something that really inspired some, like, what is it you talk about when you're all together, and that you're
good question.
Does one stand out for you where you thought this was really useful and some people are going to go away with?
Well, I'll use my own experience, because in the spirit of tech, I don't think it's fair to share what happens inside a meeting, you know?
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't want it to lead to somebody specific, but I could speak to myself, and I can say that, I had a couple of experiences, and I think that first off, I would say that vulnerability, we can all share. We could sit down and talk to a stranger and just, verbal diarrhea about, how bad my day has been and woe is me and all that kind of stuff. But it isn't that. It is crippling as a business owner to continue to not let those scars heal while you continue to bleed while no one sees.
Okay. And
when you have that, what is that? It could be like the list goes on and on, but I think, I'll bare my soul here for a minute to say this. There was a time, and I talked about winning the Super Bowl versus, making money, where I wasn't really making money. And I was probably surviving more than thriving. And I had no one to talk to about it.
Right.
And I was able to share with others that I wasn't making money. I wasn't really doing, but by the way, this is all hidden because I'm an entrepreneur and I don't want people to see the failures.
Right.
I only want them to see the success. We have hundreds of clients. We're the best company ever. We're so good at what we do, but don't look in my books because I'm failing miserably.
But you kind of have to portray that too, right?
Of course you do.
You were saying earlier, you have to portray the vision that you have, and for your team, you have to be a leader.
Of course.
Show some leadership.
So had the opportunity to share.
How do you,
So I had the opportunity to share in a group and talk about it a little bit. And then, so imagine the next year went from, in this case, went from 600 clients to 300 clients.
Okay.
Sounds like a failure on the outside. Best thing I ever did.
Is that right?
Because, absolutely. What I did was I took a bunch of customers that I wasn't making money from. I let them bring my service level down. I wanted to be, use a simple analogy, which those that know me, I use all the time. I would rather be the keg than McDonald's, but not that McDonald's isn't super successful. I just want the elevated service.
Right.
Anybody in the States that's listening to that, to be like a Shula's high end, like steakhouse kind of thing. But my point is that to me, I wanted that, but I let them bring it down. So we were providing services. We were at low cost. We were not being profitable, which didn't allow me to let those profits not to go in my pocket, but to go in the team's pocket and raise everybody up so that we could have got better. I did that. I thought I was crazy, but this was based by sharing with a group. That group then helped me to say, have you ever thought of actually getting rid of the clients that don't do well for you? It's a long pause. No, because what about Mrs. So-and-so and Mr. Such and such? And I helped them and so forth. But it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that they had the opportunity to come along. It's that to provide the service, we always think, I'm sorry, my price is going up. And don't get me wrong, I also think that a lot of companies' prices go up doesn't mean they're better. We just adjusted how we delivered service. We adjusted how we did things. And it was the start of a completely different mindset and a completely different business for me. I can openly say that I would never have gone, my business wouldn't have thrived the same way without tech. My business wouldn't have thrived without being able to share in a group. My business would never have been able to exit a business at a multi-million-dollar company and sell it. I wouldn't have been able to do that without the assistance of a big group who all shared the same caliber of problems and concerns. And by the way, some of them had already gone through what I went through in terms of selling a business. So imagine sitting in a room. I didn't do what they all did, but I took their information. okay, I like what you did there. I'm going to take this. And it's no different than the panning for gold. You know, you reach into the riverbank and you...
And also it breaks the loneliness. You're no longer... There's a support network.
You can share with people that don't think you're crazy. It's true. And I hate using the word crazy, but in this case, I think it actually is relevant because you're not... Mental health and entrepreneurs, I think we all do it. We disregard certain things because our belief in our success is far greater than the scars and battle wounds that we get along the way. You know, go back to a David Goggins thing. You know, I think he says that if you have 100 people go into a battle, you might have 90 of them that shouldn't be there, 10 of them that should be there, but only one of them's a real warrior. I don't think it's much different than entrepreneurs.
That's right.
There's probably a bunch of them. They run a business. And I would say too, I think that business owners would agree that some business owners, when you get into running a business, once a business is up and running, I think it's a bit different. Your CEOs and your CFOs, they can jump in, CEOs, they can jump in and they can, you know, look after a company, manage it, have it grow, have it think. But the risks were different. That, you know, they're a much different risk level. I'm not saying they're not. There's still risk. It's just a different risk. Okay. That's all.
I feel like I could ask you so many questions. You've been so generous with your time already. But I think, and I always tell my guests this is the most boring question, but I love to ask it anyway, just kind of to finish off. But there are so many mindset qualities, and we've mentioned a lot of them over the past conversation. But if you had to pick one for the upcoming, you know, founders in this day and age, is there one in particular for you as a coach that you would say, if you don't have this, it might be hard to make it?
Okay, I'd love to just burst out and say it's resilience and it's this and it's, you know, it's that. And the reason that I would, you know, not to sound like a politician and bounce around with different answers, because I do think that it's a combination. And I think that the combination is dependent on where your business is in its life cycle. In the beginning, if you're not resilient, you'll never make it. If you don't have grit further on, you'll challenge. But I'm going to say this in retrospect because, you know, going through I've had some massive failures. But you know, they were life lessons, and in the time they were failures because you're afraid of them. But you know, until I read Viktor Frankl's book over and over and over and over again, I hate to say this to those that aren't readers, but I've read that book, I don't know, 100 times. And I think I've read it 100 times. And I've also read sections of it multiple times. No human has ever put on paper the description of dehumanizing. And I take that from the entrepreneurial perspective, where the only way he survived was by his mindset. So if you're not willing to do that, you know, don't look at what you're not able to do. Look at what you're able to do. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what you do have. If I'm not, and in the moment, sometimes you really need to do that. You know, early on in my life, I played team sports and I was so focused on team and team and team. And then I jumped out and I started to do triathlons early on. And I did them in a team environment first and then on my own. And then after that, I would always have this mindset, well, if I can do that, I can do this. If I can do that, I can do this. And then that's why with that sort of Viktor Frankl book, that's been a massive influence in my life. And that's the only way I can describe that part. I don't think that if you can't look at what you have or what you could have, if I can make it through today, I could get to tomorrow. So if I could get through my business right now, I could get to tomorrow. So I think that's...
So looking at what you do have and what you've accomplished, what about the idea of aiming very high? And I'm getting this from a prior coach that was on the show. His name is Graham Barlow, where he was saying, you don't aim for, $10,000, a company, 10,000, I'm going to make $10,000 this year. I'm throwing this number out.
Yeah.
You aim for, 10 million.
Yeah.
And at the time, the 10 million can seem absolutely outrageous when you're starting off. But to him, he's like, that's what you have. It has to be bigger, much bigger than what you could possibly imagine. What's your thoughts on that? Is that
I think
a recipe for feeling like a failure if it doesn't happen? Or is it...
Well, feeling
does it
like
drive
a failure,
you enough that you're actually gonna make it?
Feeling like a failure, I think every business owner that I know, they all have the same thing. They beat themselves up pretty bad. Nobody else needs to beat them up. They can beat themselves up pretty bad.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, like when I've had a big, failure, so to speak, I go back and the first thing I do to myself is, you stupid idiot. Why did you, and then you just, but I beat myself up. I do, I use a factor of beat myself up in the moment. I have a rule, can only be 3 minutes.
Okay.
That's it. Let it out though.
Yeah.
Let it out. Don't hold it back. Let it out. Beat yourself up. So I'm going to steal from someone else on this, in this idea. And I'm going to say that I think that it's great to have lofty goals. I think it's fantastic. I think that if I had a self-limiting goal that today was going, I'm going to make $1. Okay. So when I make $1 and I push past that $1 and $2, well, does that mean I'm better than what I said? No. But why can't I have a goal of this? However, if I don't make that goal, I think that I set my goal too high. So make steps to the goal.
Right.
Recently, I've been using an analogy that you're going on a plane and you can only bring your carry-on. And I think that that's the same thing. The destination is where you're going.
Right.
But what do I bring to make those small steps, those micro steps to success? I think it's okay to set big goals, but you also got to give yourself micro goals so that you can kind of be okay with where you are. No company is going to 10 million in a year. It's not happening. I shouldn't say that. Most likely it's not going to happen. And, that's just self-limiting, and maybe you could, maybe you couldn't, all that. But I firmly believe that if you believe you can do something, someday I'm going to, goes back to the should. I'm going to.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you didn't get there today, it doesn't make you a failure. It just means you didn't get there today. So tomorrow, dust yourself off, get back up, and go at it. Right. That's it. There's so many coaches and high-end coaches that you have to have so many foundational parts set in your pyramid that if you don't have this foundation set, you'll never get to here. And if you don't have this foundation set, you won't get to here and here and here. So I think that having big goals up here are great, but you got to have pieces of the foundation that you got to set first. So it's okay to do that. I know I danced around that a little bit, but it's just, it's twofold answer.
But I like that you danced around it, because it's more complex than it sounds when it's presented sometimes in a certain way.
This leads me to something that I think is important, and all business owners do this. Everybody, do you have a strat plan?
Yes.
There's a lot of business coaches that go that you have to have a strat plan. Okay. I'm not disagreeing. You don't have to have a strat plan.
Yeah.
But what is your strat plan? Well, a multitude of small businesses will say, my strat plan is we're going to make $10 million this year. Okay. How?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we're going to win games. How? We're going to do this. How? That's not a strat plan.
Yeah.
A strat plan to me is we're going to practice. We're going to work on our offense. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. We're going to work on customer experience. We're going to work on our accounting. We're going to do this. Or even crazier, we're going to create a culture in our work that isn't about Pizza Friday, and it's about making our team stronger and how they get better and what to do are the right things. And then the team's going to take you to a championship. So I don't think the championship is the goal. I think how you're going to get there is the goal, or the strat plan.
Right.
So I think just building out those kind of things is a little bit different, more unique.
All right. Well, listen, Ed, again, thank you so much for coming. So many really great insights, lots of experience. And you're a coach now, so I know you're sharing all this experience and all these insights with the tech group, which is a very interesting endeavor.
Thank you.
in
Appreciate
itself. Yeah. And I'm really glad you took some time and you came all the way out here and sat
no
with
worries.
us.
And for me
shared.
to you, thank you. You know what? It's nice that you've picked a great topic, I think, for entrepreneurs. And I think you've really touched on the opportunity to give people a voice here too. So good for you. I'm excited to see where
Thank
your
you very
journey
much.
goes.
Well, every time I hear stories from founders and from people like yourself with more experience, I always feel uplifted. I really do. And that's the reason I do it. I listen to these stories and I walk out thinking, wow, it's inspiring, it's uplifting, it's positive, and I think we need a lot of that in this day and age.
Great reason to listen to your podcast.
Thank you so much, Ed. I appreciate that. You all heard it. Great reason to listen to the podcast. And we have great guests coming up as yourself. And after that, I think Nilüfer, who you know well also, is going to be giving us some of her insights. And, we have people knocking at the door. So
that's great.
It's
awesome.
Yeah, it's gaining some momentum. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of our 6th episode. It really means a lot once again. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Ed Hanson. Truly some grateful insights into mindset and business life in general. If you're looking for more content like this, make sure to follow us on Instagram. This is where we post all our updates. This is where you learn about future episodes. And if you want to truly be a part of the community, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you